Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Ballava Giribaradhare Gopi Jana Ballava Giribaradhare Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Ballava Giribaradhare Gopi Jana Ballava Giribaradhare Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jai Vishnupada, Paramahansa, Parivrajacharyas, Status and Systematis, Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki, ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Sri Sri Radha Radhanath Ki, Sri Giri Govardhan Ki, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu Ki, Sankirtan Yagya Ki, Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are reading this morning from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 20, Lord Vishnu's appearance in the sacrificial arena of Maharaj Prithu. And we're reading today verse 29. Correct. Bhajanti atta tvam atta eva sadhavo vyudasta maya guna vibramodayam bhavat padanusmaranad rite satam nimitam anyad bhagavan na vidmahe bhajantyata tvam ata eva sadhavo vyudastamaya guna vibramodayam bhavat padanu smaranadrite satam nimittam anyad bhagavana vidmahe bhajantyata tvam ata eva sadhavo vyudastamaya guna vibramodayam bhavat padanu smaranadrite satam nimittam anyad bhagavana vidmahe bhajantyata tvam ata eva sadhavo vyudastamaya guna vibramodayam bhavat padanu smaranadrite satam Nimittamanyad Bhagavana Vidmahe. Bhajanti, they worship. Atta, therefore. Tvam, you. Atta eva, therefore. Sadhava, all saintly persons. Vyudhasta, who dispel. Maya guna, the modes of material nature. Vibrama, misconceptions. Udayam, produced. Bhavat, your. Pada, lotus feet. Anusmaranat, constantly remembering. Rite, except. Satam, of great saintly persons. Nimittam, reason. Anyat, other. Bhagavan, O Supreme Personality of Godhead. Na, not. Vidmahe, I can understand. Yes, okay, translation. Great saintly persons who are always liberated, take to your devotional service, because only by devotional service can one be relieved from the illusions of material existence. O my Lord, there is no reason for the liberated souls to take shelter at your lotus feet, except that such souls are constantly thinking of your feet. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The karmis are generally engaged in fruitive activities for material bodily comforts. The jnanis, however, are disgusted with searching after material comforts. They understand that they have nothing to do with this material world, being spirit souls. After self-realizations, the jnanis, who are actually mature in their knowledge, must surrender unto the lotus feet of the Lord, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, Bahunam Janmanam Ante, chapter 7, verse 19. Self-realization is not complete unless one comes to the devotional platform. Therefore it is stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam that those who are Atmarama, self-satisfied, are freed from all contaminations of the material modes of nature. As long as one is affected by the modes of material nature, especially by rajas and tamas, he will be very greedy and lusty and will therefore engage in hard tasks, laboring all day and night. Such false egoism carries one from one species of life into another perpetually, and there is no rest in any species of life. The jnani understands this fact and therefore ceases to work and takes to karma sannyas. Yet, this is not actually the platform of satisfaction. After self-realization, the material wisdom of the jnani leads him to the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. Then he is satisfied only in contemplating the lotus feet of the Lord constantly. Prithu Maharaj therefore concluded that liberated persons taking to the devotional path have acquired the ultimate goal of life. If liberation were the end in itself, there would be no question of a liberated person's taking to devotional service. In other words, the transcendental bliss derived from self-realization, known as Atmananda, is very insignificant in the presence of the bliss derived from devotional service to the lotus feet of the Lord. Prithu Maharaj therefore concluded that he would simply hear of the glories of the Lord constantly, and thus engage his mind upon the lotus feet of the Lord. That is the highest perfection of life. Bhajantyata tvam ata eva sadhavo vyudastamaya guna vibramodayam bhavat padanu smaranadrite satam nimittaman yad bhagavan navidmahe. Great saintly persons who are always liberated, take to your devotional service, because only by devotional service can one be relieved from the illusions of material existence. O my Lord, there is no reason for the liberated souls to take shelter at your lotus feet, except that such souls are constantly thinking of your feet. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Caitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. Yes. Right. Just one. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschitya Deshatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna. So this is another very nice verse. Very nice verse. Just bringing out very clearly and cleverly, very clearly how devotional service is the highest activity. It's higher than any regular material activity of just trying to enjoy the senses with the different facilities provided by material nature to eat, drink, and be merry, that sort of idea. So devotional service is higher than that. But it's also higher than some impersonal type of process of liberation, or for achieving liberation from that entanglement in material existence. A devotional service is higher than that, and the result achieved by devotional service is much higher than the result achieved by what to speak of material sense gratification, but the result achieved through some type of liberation, generally impersonal liberation, or you could say partially personal form of liberation, like the Paramatma realization of the mystical yogis. We talked about that a week ago or so. Yes, so this is very important and very interesting point. So the thing is the way it's presented here, that the jnanis, the karmis, of course, we mentioned, they're just absorbed in attempts to gratify the senses in all sorts of mundane ways. Sense gratification. Try and acquire material facility and then put your senses in contact with that material facility, some material object or whatever it may be, and in this way achieve some stimulation for the senses, some sensation of pleasure, and then that's it. That's it. And of course nowadays you get people who are just exceptionally, very exceptionally successful in material life, and they're just accumulating so much material facility, so much material facility for their senses to then get involved with and contact and get stimulated by, but they're finding that it doesn't really work. It doesn't make your life any nicer than that of some ordinary person who's just has very limited facility for sense gratification. And then some of them, of course, experiencing that I'm not increasing my experience of enjoyment by increasing my possessions and facilities for sense gratification. Then what happens with many, or some of them, however many, is that they then try to get pleasure by giving away their material facilities, particularly their money. They give away their money, people become very excited. Oh, you gave us your money, thank you so much, it's wonderful. And the person now, that's how he gets pleasure from the money. Because there's no point in getting another house, in getting another motor car. I read of the one man who had 93 Rolls Royces. It's just, it just illustrates the point very nicely. Just one, normally, for so many people would be just, an amazing thing. 2, 3, 93. It just illustrates the point. Is what you're going to do. It's foolishness, unfortunately. Yeah. And so on and so forth. All these types of situations people get into when they become successful in accumulating material facility. But then, as Prabhupada describes here, then you get the jnanis. The jnanis, jnana of course means knowledge, and jnani means a person who has knowledge, and ultimately that jnana, that knowledge, is spiritual, knowledge of things beyond just the ordinary material level. And the experience they get from that knowledge and whatever activities they take part in on the basis of that knowledge, the pleasure they get from that is a lot greater than the pleasure that the materialists get from their sense gratification. This is described in Nectar of Devotion, that actually the example is used in 2 situations. The first situation is the materialists versus the jnanis, comparing the pleasure that they get from their different activities. So there it's said in Nectar of Devotion that the jnanis, particularly the ones who are really successful in their jnani activity, then the pleasure they get from their impersonal self-realization is compared to the amount of water in the hoof print of a is like an ocean, whereas the pleasure that the materialists get from their sense gratification is compared to the amount of water in the hoof print of a calf, not even a cow, whose hoof print is bigger, of course, but just that of a calf. And the second example, which is being brought out here particularly, is when you compare those same jnanis, successful jnanis, who have achieved impersonal self-realization and got pleasure so much more than the materialists. But then when you compare the pleasure that those jnanis get, same pleasure, which we compared to the pleasure of the materialists a moment ago, when you compare that to the pleasure which the devotees get, then the same, Rupa Goswami gives exactly the same example. That the pleasure of the devotees is like an ocean, even an unlimited ocean, whereas the pleasure of those jnanis, impersonally realized people, is compared to the amount of water in the hoof print of a calf. Exactly the same example, but used in a different way. So anyway, these jnanis, by dint of their realizations, impersonal, spiritual, transcendental realizations, when they look back at how they were engaged in material life before and trying to enjoy the senses, then the jnanis feel disgusted. What is this? What was I doing? How could I have done that? They're just disgusted by the whole program of material pursuits and trying to get material comforts and enjoyable things. Yes, so we know, the example is there of Yamunacharya, that he had been a materialist He had been a king, actually, and had been fantastically wealthy, and therefore he had access to fantastic amounts of material enjoyment, and he was particularly attached to illicit sex life. But then he became a devotee, and a very elevated devotee. And so famously he says that now when I think back to all that enjoyment I had with the opposite sex, which at the time I thought is just wonderful and the best thing in life. But now when I think back to that, it seems so just pathetic, and not just pathetic, but like rotten and disgusting, just disgusting, and hopeless, useless. So he says that my lips curl in distaste and I spit at the thought. Srila Prabhupada would quote that verse sometimes, and there were occasions where he a little famously said that Yamunacharya says that my lips curl in distaste and I spite at the thought. Spite. It's like, well, I mean, you could take it in different ways, but you could say that it's a particularly strong form of spitting, perhaps. Not really, but spite means just rejects it, just like, almost like violently rejects it, something like that. Of course, that's devotional pleasure compared to material pleasure. The point here, though, is the particular point is how the jnanis are disgusted through their impersonal spiritual realization. They're disgusted with material sense gratification. Yes, they're disgusted with that, and they're getting a higher pleasure from their impersonal realization. But still, even they who are on that much higher level of understanding and experience than the materialists engage in sense gratification, even they, despite that higher experience, when they have contact with the Supreme Personality of Godhead through devotional service, then they reject their impersonal realization, and they reject the pleasure that they get from that impersonal realization. And so in that regard, Srila Prabhupada here refers to a very famous verse, actually, the Atmarama verse. The Atmarama verse. Lord Caitanya, it's in Caitanya Charitamrita, that when Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was trying to convince Lord Caitanya, more or less, not to be a devotee, but rather to be an impersonalist. So he referred, anyway, he was speaking like that. Then Lord Caitanya quoted that Atmarama verse, how the impersonalists, even the realized impersonalists, not just your sort of amateur impersonalists, which is basically all you get today, but even if you're a fully realized impersonalist, then if you have contact with Krishna consciousness, you just give up the impersonalism and engage in Krishna's devotional service, because you get so much more pleasure from doing that. And Lord Caitanya then gave 64 explanations of the Atmarama verse. And that's all there in Caitanya Charitamrita. You can look it up, hopefully you've read it already. But that's there. The whole discussion and everything is there in Caitanya Charitamrita. So that Atmarama verse goes, if I can remember it properly, Atmaramas chamunayo, negranta apyarukrame, kuravantya kim bhaktim, itam bhutam guna hari. Did I get it? You should know that verse. Anyway, if you don't know it, learn it. It's a good one. Atmaramas, those Atmaramas, the impersonalists who are self-satisfied, satisfied in the self through their impersonal cultivation and realization, that those Atmaramas, Atmaramas Chamunai, Atmaramas Munis, Negranta Apyarukrame, Kuravant Yahaitakim Bhaktim, they take part in Ahoitaki Bhakti, means pure devotional service, unmotivated devotional service to Krishna. And why do they do that? Because itam bhuta guna hari. Because Lord Hari has itam bhuta guna, qualities which are transcendental beyond the experience, not just of the materialists, but also beyond the experience of the impersonalists. Yeah. And therefore, these impersonalists, they take to devotional service and they just become completely absorbed in devotional service, totally absorbed in devotional service, because they're getting that higher experience of the guna hari, the qualities of Lord Hari, of Lord Krishna. And having those experiences of the qualities of Lord Krishna, they just forget about the experiences they have of impersonal realization and impersonal type of pleasure. And they reject it and they kick it out. They don't just, it's not just a matter that, well, it's better. But it's like, it's so much better, they just kick out the idea of impersonalism. And as stated here, Maharaj Prithu says, they particularly, I mean, there's all sorts of subtleties and particular specific aspects to the whole understanding and situation, but what's mentioned here is that particularly those already liberated souls, they're already liberated before they take shelter of the Lord or have contact with the Lord. They're already liberated. But what do? They take shelter at the Lord's lotus feet. Because they're constantly thinking of the Lord's feet. Now, of course, we come across this whole idea of worshipping the Lord's lotus feet, meditating on, serving the lotus feet of the Lord. And that's how many times is that presented in our literatures? Just so many times. This is not the only time or the first time by any means. But an interesting consideration is that feet are the lowest part of the body. And oftentimes, by their nature and the sort of situations feet get into, oftentimes they are not appreciated amongst the community of materialists. Like, sometimes you read reports of people flying on an airplane and they take their shoes off, and they're wearing socks. Maybe it's yesterday's socks or something like that, and so there's an odor coming. And sometimes I've read a number of reports of people objecting and either complaining to the staff on the aeroplane or just taking it up directly with the person, like, stop this. This is really not nice. So the feet are not really appreciated. Whereas the head, particularly the face, is appreciated the most. To have a pretty face, an attractive face, a decorated face, a face, all these cosmetics, a lot of these cosmetics, perfumes and so on, they're to be put on or around the face, like around the neck. They do it, isn't it? I'm not an expert on the subject, but I hear things like that. To enhance the face, because the face is, it's so public. It's so public, the face. The rest of the body is covered, kind of public, but in a sense, but not like the face, just completely open to people's view. But the feet, they're not so nice, as people generally would say. But the thing is, in Krishna consciousness, in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even this lowest part of the body, often sort of criticized and not appreciated in material circles, even this lowest part of the body of the Lord is addressed so often as being very beautiful and worshipable. Yes. And the already liberated souls, they're already liberated impersonally through following some sort of process of that type. But then they become attracted to the Lord, itam bhuta guna, because he has transcendental qualities. But then what do? They focus on his feet. And they constantly think, as described here. They take shelter of his feet, and they constantly think of his feet, because his feet are actually just really wonderful. They're not at all like the feet of the materialists, particularly in the negative sense. But those feet are just so glorious and beautiful and divine that these people, having come now to Krishna consciousness, devotional service, they may just sit there and just meditate on the lotus feet of the Lord, just perpetually, on an ongoing basis. That's really amazing. Yes. So, right. In that way, and a person who does that, Prithu Maharaj concludes here that they have acquired the ultimate goal of life. Meditating on the lotus feet of the Lord, they have achieved the ultimate goal of life. Yes. And that liberation which they achieved, the impersonal liberation before, they see it's not an end in itself. Yes. And they get so much more pleasure. So therefore Prithu Maharaj, Prabhupada says, Prithu Maharaj therefore concluded that he would simply hear of the glories of the Lord constantly and thus engage his mind upon the lotus feet of the Lord. And that is the highest perfection of life. Hare Krishna. Any comments or questions? Devotees? Anything? Comments, questions, corrections, disputations? Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.